The taste of success was supposed to be sweeter than this. I stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse, 30 stories above the city I'd spent my life conquering. A tumbler of 18-year-old Macallan warming in my palm. Below me, the city sparkled like scattered diamonds against black velvet, a testament to human ambition to my ambition. The reflection staring back at me from the glass told its own story. Silver threading through once jet-black hair, lines carved by stress and determination around eyes that had seen failure transform into empire. At 52, Robert Calloway had become the name developers whispered with respect. The man who had transformed a struggling local construction outfit into Calloway Enterprises, soon to be the builder of the $30 million downtown convention center. So why did victory taste like ash in my mouth? The answer was simple. Success meant nothing without someone to share it with. 3 years ago, Claire had stood in this very spot, her designer suitcases packed by the door, her wedding ring placed with theatrical precision on the marble countertop. "I need more than financial security, Robert," she'd said, voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "I need to feel alive again." Alive. As if the 23 years we'd spent building a life together had been some form of death. As if the sacrifices I'd made, the endless nights, the missed vacations, the postponed dreams had been for nothing. Later, I learned feeling alive meant feeling her 35-year-old yoga instructor inside her. By then, the divorce papers were already signed, the assets divided, our shared history reduced to legal terminology and financial settlements. The only thing we couldn't divide was Ethan. Our son had been 23 then, already independent in theory, but the divorce had fractured something fundamental in him. I saw less and less of him over the following years, our relationship congealing into stilted monthly dinners where we discussed everything except what mattered. I took another sip of whiskey, letting the smoky warmth spread through my chest. The irony wasn't lost on me that my professional life should peak just as my personal life hit rock bottom. With Claire gone and Ethan distant, I'd thrown myself into the business with manic intensity, transforming a respectable local firm into the most sought-after commercial contractor in the state. The convention center contract was the culmination of that effort, the validation of every sacrifice. I should have been celebrating. Instead, I was drinking alone on a Tuesday night. The vibration of my phone against the granite countertop broke my reverie. I glanced at the screen, expecting another congratulatory message from someone who wanted something from me. Instead, I saw an unfamiliar number, a text message preview. Again, so sorry about today. Insurance info attached. Still owe you that coffee. Mia. My mind traveled back to the minor fender bender, that morning rush hour traffic, a moment's distraction, the gentle crunch of metal on metal. I'd been more annoyed by the delay than the damage to my Range Rover, already mentally calculating the minutes lost from my schedule. Then the driver's door of the modest sedan behind me had opened, and annoyance had evaporated like morning dew under summer sun. She couldn't have been more than 35, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and eyes that crinkled apologetically when she smiled. She'd been mortified, immediately accepting fault, her voice melodic even in distress. When she'd learned who I was, there had been no shift in her demeanor, no sudden fawning or calculating gleam. Instead, she'd insisted on buying me coffee to apologize for making me late, scribbling her number on a receipt from her wallet when I explained I had a meeting I couldn't miss. "Rain check then," she'd said with a smile that lingered in my memory even now, 12 hours later. "I make a terrible first impression, but I promise I'm much better at second chances." I hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen. It had been months since I'd engaged with a woman who wasn't either an employee, a client, or someone's wife at a corporate function. The thought of coffee with a stranger, an attractive female stranger, unleashed a swarm of anxieties I thought I'd outgrown decades ago. Before I could overthink it further, I typed a response. Damage was minimal. Don't worry about it. Coffee sounds good. When? I hit send before I could reconsider, then immediately regretted it. Too eager, too available. I should have waited, played it cool, maintained the upper hand. The habits of corporate negotiation died hard, apparently extending even to casual interactions. To my surprise, the response was almost immediate. Tomorrow, 1 p.m. at Riverfront Cafe? Unless that's too soon, in which case I promise not to crash into any more luxury vehicles until a more convenient time presents itself. I found myself smiling at the screen. An unfamiliar sensation. Humor. Warmth. A lack of agenda that felt almost alien after years of calculated business relationships. 1 p.m. works. I'll be the guy not filing an insurance claim. After sending the reply, I set down my phone and returned to the window, the city lights somehow brighter than they'd seemed moments before. The whiskey in my hand was still the same, the penthouse still as empty, my achievement still as hollow, but something had shifted, a microscopic tilt in the universe. It was just coffee, I reminded myself, nothing more than a social pleasantry, an obligation she felt after a minor traffic incident. Yet as I watched the nighttime dance of headlights 30 stories below, I allowed myself to feel something I'd nearly forgotten. Anticipation. Riverfront Cafe sat on the ground floor of a converted warehouse, its industrial chic aesthetic drawing the lunch crowd of young professionals and creative types who populated the recently gentrified arts district. I arrived 15 minutes early, a lifelong habit impossible to break, securing a corner table that offered both privacy and a view of the entrance. I dressed casually dark jeans and a charcoal sweater over a button-down, but still felt conspicuously overdressed among the tattoos and deliberately distressed denim surrounding me. I checked my watch, suddenly aware I hadn't been on anything resembling a date in over 25 years. Was this even a date? The distinction seemed important, yet impossible to determine. I opened my phone, scrolling through emails without seeing them, a familiar defense mechanism against the unfamiliar sensation of nervousness. For a man who commands $30 million projects, you look surprisingly terrified by a coffee shop. I looked up to find her standing beside the table, her smile transforming my anxiety into something lighter, almost buoyant. Mia was dressed in scrubs beneath an open leather jacket, her dark hair loose around her shoulders, somehow managing to look both professional and effortlessly beautiful. Medical professional? I asked, standing to pull out her chair, an old-fashioned courtesy that felt natural despite its rarity in modern contexts. Pediatric nurse. She confirmed, settling into the seat with a grateful nod. Just finished a 12-hour shift, so I apologize in advance if I start assessing your reflexes or asking about your bowel movements. I laughed, the sound surprising me with its authenticity. I'll consider myself warned. 12 hours sounds brutal. Says the man whose company is featured in Business Insider's hardest working CEOs list. She countered, unwinding a scarf from her neck. I did my homework after I realized whose car I'd dented. Impressive research skills, I said, raising an eyebrow. Though I'm only on the regional list, not the national one. Very different caliber of workaholism. My mistake, she said with mock seriousness. Clearly I've wasted my afternoon with a mere regional workaholic. I should have held out for at least a national level overachiever. A waitress approached, and we ordered a black coffee for me, a chai latte for her. The conversation flowed with unexpected ease, jumping from topic to topic with a natural rhythm I hadn't experienced in years of business-adjacent small talk. She told me about her work at the Children's Hospital, the challenges and rewards of pediatric oncology nursing. I found myself sharing stories about the early days of my company, the near bankruptcies and desperate gambles that predated my current success. "So that's how you ended up personally operating a bulldozer at 4 in the morning?" she asked, eyes wide with amusement at the conclusion of a story I'd never shared with anyone, not even Claire. "There may also have been a bottle of Jack Daniels involved in the decision-making process," I admitted. "But yes, desperate times called for desperate measures. We couldn't afford to delay the project another day, and the regular operator had quit. It's amazing what you can learn from a YouTube tutorial in sheer panic." I'm trying to reconcile that image with the Robert Calloway who stared at me from the Forbes regional cover last month, she said, stirring her second chai thoughtfully. Brooks Brothers suit, power stance, the headline, "Building an Empire from the Ground Up." I felt a flash of discomfort at the reminder of my public persona, the carefully constructed image of confidence and control. "That guy's mostly a PR creation," I said, surprising myself with the candor. "The real version still wakes up at 3 a.m., convinced it's all about to fall apart." Mia's expression softened, her hand moving across the table to briefly touch mine, the contact sending an electric current up my arm. "I think I like the bulldozer, stealing Insomniac better than the magazine cover version anyway." The simple sincerity in her voice bypassed my usual defenses, slipping beneath the armor I'd constructed over years of corporate battles and personal disappointments. For one dangerous moment, I imagined what it would be like to have someone who saw beyond the facade, who understood that success hadn't immunized me against vulnerability. "We should probably order some actual food," I said, gently redirecting as the moment threatened to become too intimate too quickly. "I missed breakfast, and your post-12-hour shift. Hunger makes people say dangerously honest things." She smiled, accepting the shift in tone with grace. "Food sounds perfect, though I reserve the right to continue being dangerously honest on a full stomach." We ordered sandwiches, and the conversation moved to safer territory favorite films, travel destinations, the gentrification controversy surrounding the cafe's neighborhood. I found myself lingering over my coffee long after it had cooled, reluctant to end an interaction that had reawakened something I'd thought permanently dormant. When we finally stepped outside, the afternoon sun was bathing the riverside district in golden light, transforming the industrial landscape into something almost picturesque. I walked her to her car, an aging Subaru with bumper stickers supporting various environmental causes. "So," she said, turning to face me beside her vehicle, "was this an adequate apology for nearly destroying your luxury automobile?" "More than adequate," I replied, suddenly conscious of our height difference, the way her head would fit perfectly beneath my chin if I stepped closer. "Though the damage was hardly noticeable." "Then I guess my debt is paid," she said, a question in her eyes that made my heart accelerate like it hadn't in decades. "Actually," I heard myself saying, "I think insurance requires at least one dinner to properly resolve the claim. It's standard procedure." Her smile bloomed slowly, transforming her face. "Is that so? Well, I wouldn't want to violate insurance protocols. That sounds very serious." "Extremely serious," I agreed, matching her playful tone. "Dinner is the only responsible course of action." "Then I accept," she said, retrieving her phone from her jacket pocket. "In the interest of proper insurance compliance." We exchanged numbers properly this time, and I found myself suggesting Friday night, already mentally rearranging meetings to accommodate the date. As I watched her drive away, I felt something I hadn't experienced since my 20s, the simple, uncomplicated anticipation of seeing someone again. The next 2 months passed in a blur of professional triumphs and personal revelations. The convention center contract negotiations entered their final stages, each meeting bringing us closer to the largest deal in the company's history. Yet for the first time in years, work wasn't the central focus of my existence. Mia entered my life like a whirlwind, uprooting entrenched habits and challenging long-held assumptions. Our first dinner date extended into a 4-hour conversation that left both of us reluctant to part. The second date included a spontaneous detour to a jazz club where we danced despite my initial protest that I didn't know how. By the third week, we were spending most evenings together, either at my penthouse or exploring parts of the city I'd driven past for years without truly seeing. We made love for the first time after a charity gala where she'd accompanied me, stunning in a borrowed gown, navigating the social complexities of my business world with surprising ease. Later, in the darkness of my bedroom, I'd confessed my insecurities about our age gap, about the physical imperfections of a man past 50. "Do you think I care about that?" she'd asked, her fingers tracing the contours of my face with a tenderness that made my chest ache. "I've spent my career watching children fight for their lives, Robert. It teaches you what matters, and wrinkles aren't on that list." In her arms, I found myself rediscovering parts of my identity I'd sacrificed to ambition, the capacity for joy, for spontaneity, for emotional vulnerability. She pulled me out of my self-imposed isolation, insisting we try new restaurants, attend community events, live in the world rather than above it. When I protested that I needed to work, she simply brought her laptop to my home office, working on continuing education courses while I reviewed contracts, her presence somehow making the work feel less consuming. "You've changed." Jack Sullivan, my CFO and oldest friend, commented after a particularly successful negotiation session where I'd agreed to compromise on a point I would have previously fought to the death. "It's like someone replaced my bulldog with a golden retriever." "I haven't changed," I protested. "I've just gained perspective." Jack's knowing smile told me he wasn't fooled. "She must be something special, this nurse of yours." I didn't deny it, because it was true. Mia was something special, not just beautiful and intelligent, but genuinely kind in a way that seemed increasingly rare in my world of calculated advantages and strategic relationships. She volunteered at homeless shelters on weekends, remembered the names of baristas and parking attendants, tipped generously despite her modest income. She approached life with an authenticity that both attracted and terrified me, making me question the values that had guided my existence for decades. Yet for all that emotional intimacy, one significant wall remained between us: Ethan. Despite dating Mia for 2 months, I'd resisted introducing them, manufacturing excuses whenever she suggested meeting my son. "He's got his own life," I'd explain. "Between his job at the advertising agency and his social circle, we barely see each other once a month for dinner." The truth was more complicated. My relationship with Ethan had deteriorated further in the years since the divorce, our monthly dinners becoming increasingly strained exercises in avoiding meaningful conversation. He blamed me for the failure of my marriage, for prioritizing work over family, for being the kind of husband that would drive a woman like Claire into another man's arms. While never explicitly stated, his resentment simmered beneath the surface of every interaction. I feared Mia's reaction to this broken relationship, worried she would see in my failings as a father evidence of deeper character flaws. More selfishly, I wanted to preserve the blissful bubble we'd created, unsullied by the complications of family dynamics and old wounds. Mia's persistence finally wore down my resistance one Sunday morning as we lay tangled in my sheets, the city hazy through the bedroom windows. "When do I get to meet your son?" she asked, her fingers tracing idle patterns on my chest. Her dark hair splayed across my pillow. You talk about him constantly, but I'm starting to think he's imaginary. I sighed, knowing I'd run out of plausible excuses. He's complicated, Mia. Our relationship isn't great. Hasn't been since the divorce. She propped herself up on one elbow, studying my face with the focused attention that always made me feel truly seen. All the more reason for me to meet him. I'm good with complicated people. It's literally my job description. He's not a sick child, I countered. He's a 26-year-old man with a chip on his shoulder the size of Montana, particularly where I'm concerned. And you're afraid I'll see some terrible side of you through his eyes, she said, cutting to the heart of my fear with her usual perceptiveness, that whatever he tells me will change how I feel about you. I didn't deny it. Our history isn't pretty, Mia. I made choices prioritized work over family time, missed important events, basically embodied every stereotype of the absent corporate father. He has legitimate reasons to resent me. Robert, she said gently, her palm warm against my cheek. I'm not looking for perfection. I'm not Claire, measuring you against some impossible standard. I know who you are, the good and the difficult parts. Her words loosened something tight in my chest, a fear I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it wasn't a natural part of me. He comes for dinner every month, I said finally. Usually the last Sunday. That's in a week. Her smile was radiant, a reward that made my capitulation feel like victory. Perfect. I'll be on my best behavior, I promise. No embarrassing medical stories, no illegal substances, no inappropriate cleavage. I laughed, pulling her closer. Now you're just listing all my favorite things about you. She kissed me, soft and sweet, before adding more seriously, thank you for trusting me with this. I know it's a big step. It was a big step, bigger than she realized. Despite the casual dinners and separate residences, I recognized that Mia had become essential to me in a way no one had been since the early years with Claire. Introducing her to Ethan felt like a declaration, an acknowledgement that she had become significant enough to integrate into the complicated machinery of my life. As the week progressed, my anxiety about the impending dinner grew rather than diminished. I found myself micromanaging preparations that would normally have been delegated, personally selecting the wine, deciding on my father's special lasagna recipe that had been Ethan's favorite since childhood. You're overthinking this, Mia said on Sunday afternoon as she helped me prepare the sauce, looking adorably domestic in one of my shirts with the sleeves rolled up. He's your son, not the zoning commission. The fate of the convention center doesn't hinge on his approval of me. I know, I admitted, stirring the sauce with unnecessary vigor. But this matters more. She paused in chopping basil, her expression softening. That might be the sweetest thing you've ever said to me, Robert Calloway. I felt my face warm, still uncomfortable with expressing the depth of my feelings despite the progress of recent months. Don't get used to it. I have a reputation for ruthless, emotional constipation to maintain. Your secret's safe with me, she promised, rising on tiptoes to kiss my cheek before returning to her task. By 6:30, the lasagna was baking, filling the penthouse with comforting aromas, and I had changed shirts twice, settling on a casual blue button-down that Mia insisted brought out my eyes. She looked stunning in a simple red dress that highlighted her olive skin without appearing too formal for a family dinner. You look beautiful, I told her, catching her around the waist as she arranged flowers on the dining table. Maybe too beautiful. Could you try to be a little less attractive for my peace of mind? She laughed, playfully pushing me away. Stop it. I'm already nervous enough without you adding performance pressure. What if he hates me? What if he thinks I'm too young for you? What if... The doorbell interrupted her spiral of concerns, and we both froze like teenagers caught by parents. That's him, I said unnecessarily. Always punctual, at least. Mia smoothed her dress, taking a deep breath. Okay, let's do this. I squeezed her hand reassuringly before heading to the door, trying to project a confidence I didn't feel. When I opened it, I found Ethan looking better than he had in months clean shaven, wearing the tailored shirt I'd given him for Christmas instead of his usual worn t-shirts. But most surprising was the bouquet of mixed flowers in his hand, a gesture so uncharacteristic I momentarily wondered if he'd been replaced by a doppelganger. Must be a special occasion, I said, accepting the flowers with raised eyebrows. Just good manners, Dad, he replied with a half-smile that reminded me painfully of his childhood self. Mom would kill me if I showed up empty-handed to meet your girlfriend. The casual mention of Claire, without the usual undercurrent of accusation, was so unexpected that I nearly commented on it. Instead, I simply nodded, leading him into the living room where Mia waited. The moment they saw each other, something in the air shifted. I felt it immediately, a flicker of something in Mia's eyes, quickly masked, and a subtle straightening of Ethan's posture. An invisible current seemed to pass between them, a recognition that raised the hair on my arms despite there being nothing overtly inappropriate about it. Ethan, this is Mia. Mia, my son Ethan, I said, watching their interaction with growing unease. It's wonderful to finally meet you, Mia said, extending her hand. Your father talks about you constantly. Ethan took her hand, holding it just a beat too long. Likewise, though he's been suspiciously vague about you. Mia laughed, a musical sound that usually warmed me. Now it raised a primitive warning flag. Smart man, keeps the mystery alive. I offered drinks, and the three of us moved to the living area, Mia and I on the sofa, Ethan taking the armchair opposite. The initial conversation was predictably awkward, centered on safe topics like Ethan's work at the advertising agency and the convention center project's progress. Dad's really building an empire now? Ethan commented, his tone lacking the resentful edge I'd grown accustomed to. The convention center is going to change everything for Callaway Enterprises, right? If we can execute it properly, I said cautiously, unused to Ethan showing interest in my business success. It's a big project, lots of moving parts, tight deadlines. You'll nail it, Ethan said with surprising confidence. You always do. I blinked, genuinely thrown by the vote of confidence from the person who had been my harshest critic for years. Thanks, son. That means a lot. Mia smiled at the exchange, seemingly pleased by this positive interaction. He works too hard, though, she added. I'm trying to introduce him to the concept of work-life balance. Good luck with that, Ethan chuckled. Dad's been a workaholic since I was in diapers. It's practically genetic at this point. I managed to get him to take a full weekend off last month, Mia said proudly. We went hiking at Redwood Point, no phone, no laptop. Seriously? Ethan's eyebrows shot up in genuine surprise. The same man who took business calls from the hospital when I broke my arm in 8th grade? I winced at the memory, but Mia's hand found mine, squeezing gently. People can change, she said, her eyes meeting Ethan's with an intensity that sent another warning signal through my nervous system. When they have the right motivation. The moment stretched a beat too long, before Ethan broke it by asking, So, Mia, Dad mentioned you're in healthcare. From there, the conversation gained momentum, flowing with an ease I'd never experienced with Ethan, even before the divorce strained our relationship. Dinner progressed from stiff politeness to genuine engagement as they discovered a series of unlikely connections they'd graduated from neighboring high schools the same year despite the decade between their ages, had attended the same music festival in 2019, even shared an unusual preference for pineapple on pizza that I found mildly revolting. No way, Ethan exclaimed, leaning forward across the table. You were at the Riverside Festival? We might have passed each other. In another life, maybe we would have met, Mia replied, her eyes holding his for a moment too long before flickering to me. But I'm glad we're meeting now. I forced a smile, trying to ignore the knot forming in my stomach. Their conversation flowed with an ease I'd never achieved with my son, even before the divorce. They finished each other's sentences, referenced books and films I'd never heard of, laughed at inside jokes that formed in the space of minutes. Dad, you never told me Mia was a photographer too, Ethan said, sounding almost accusatory as they compared notes on camera equipment. I blinked in surprise. I didn't know she was. Mia touched my hand. Just a hobby. I mentioned it to you last week, remember? When we were discussing renovating the spare room into a dark room. I did not remember, and from the look that passed between them, I suspected the conversation had never happened. Yet I found myself nodding, unwilling to challenge her in front of Ethan. The evening continued with that strange undercurrent, a sense of being gradually sidelined in a conversation I had expected to mediate. I watched as my son, who had maintained emotional distance from me for years, opened up to my girlfriend with startling vulnerability, discussing his creative frustrations at work, his ambitions to move into more meaningful advertising campaigns, even touching on his still raw feelings about a broken engagement the previous year. It's made it hard to trust again, he admitted, swirling the remnants of wine in his glass. Feeling like you know someone completely, then discovering you barely knew them at all. I understand that, Mia said softly. Trust isn't a switch you can flip back on once it's been broken. It has to be rebuilt, brick by brick. Ethan nodded, his expression more open than I'd seen in years. Exactly. Everyone else just tells me to get over it, move on. Like emotional damage has an expiration date. People fear other people's pain, Mia replied. It reminds them of their own vulnerability. I cleared my throat, uncomfortable with the intimacy of their exchange. Anyone for dessert? I picked up tiramisu from Marcello's. They both looked at me with identical expressions of slight surprise, as if they'd momentarily forgotten my presence. Sounds great, Dad, Ethan said, the familiar, emotional distance returning to his voice. After dinner, Ethan insisted on helping clear the table, another unprecedented event. In the kitchen, I watched through the serving hatch as they stood closer than necessary, their voices too low to hear. He seems to really like you, I commented when Ethan stepped out to take a phone call. He's wonderful, Mia said, sidling up to kiss me. Smart? Funny you did good, Robert. He's never this engaged, I admitted. Usually he's checking his watch after 30 minutes. I guess I made a good impression, she replied with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. When Ethan returned, I suggested brandy in the living room, but he checked his watch. Actually, I should get going. Early meeting tomorrow. He turned to Mia. It was really great meeting you. The pleasure was all mine, she replied warmly. Their goodbye hug lasted too long, his hand lingering on her lower back. As I walked him to the door, he surprised me with a genuine embrace. She's amazing, Dad, he said, his voice oddly emotional. Don't screw this up. After he left, I stood in the entryway, digesting his parting words. On one level, they represented exactly what I'd hoped for my son's approval of the new relationship in my life. Yet something in his tone, in the intensity of his gaze, triggered a primitive unease I couldn't quite articulate. Mia appeared beside me, slipping her arm around my waist. That went well, I think. Very well, I agreed, trying to shake off my irrational discomfort. I've never seen him so present. Usually our conversations are exercises in mutual tolerance. He's trying, she said, resting her head against my shoulder. For you, he wants you to be happy. I am happy, I said, turning to face her, cupping her cheek in my palm. Happier than I've been in years. Her smile was radiant, her eyes reflecting a warmth that temporarily banished my unease. Good, because I'm not going anywhere. We made love that night with an intensity that should have reassured me. Mia was passionate, present, focused entirely on me in ways that made coherent thought impossible. Yet, as she finally drifted to sleep beside me, her breathing deep and even, I found myself staring at the ceiling, replaying moments from dinner, searching for evidence that my unease was justified or proof that it was all in my head. The following 2 weeks brought a whirlwind of professional developments. After months of negotiations, the convention center contract moved into the final approval stage, with signing scheduled for month's end. The press caught wind of the impending deal, leading to a flurry of interviews and heightened public interest in Callaway Enterprises. My face appeared in the business section of major newspapers, and local television stations requested segments on the project's economic impact for the region. Amid this professional crescendo, I found myself increasingly distracted by the growing connection between Mia and my son. They exchanged frequent texts. I saw her smile at her phone during dinner, caught glimpses of Ethan's name on the screen. When I asked, she said they were discussing photography equipment he was considering purchasing. "I'm helping him avoid rookie mistakes," she explained, setting her phone face down on the table. "You should be happy we're getting along so well." I tried to be happy. I reminded myself repeatedly that their friendship was exactly what I should want my son and my girlfriend, forming a bond independent of me, building a foundation for potential future family harmony. Yet something in their connection triggered primitive warning bells I couldn't silence. 6 days after their first meeting, Ethan called with unprecedented news she'd been promoted to creative director at his advertising firm, leapfrogging over colleagues with years more experience. "That's incredible," I said, genuinely proud despite my confusion. Ethan had never shown much ambition, coasting on natural talent rather than hard work. "What changed?" "I guess I finally found my motivation," he replied cryptically. "Listen, we should celebrate. Dinner tomorrow? I'd love it if Mia could come too." There it was again, that flicker of unease. "She has a night shift," I lied, watching Mia across the room as she worked on her laptop. She raised an eyebrow but said nothing. "Too bad," Ethan said, the disappointment in his voice too pronounced for my comfort. "Another time, then." After hanging up, I sat in silence, processing this latest development. Mia closed her laptop and joined me on the sofa, curling against my side with her usual grace. "Ethan got promoted," I said finally. "Creative director. It's a big jump, several levels of management bypassed." "That's wonderful," she said, her enthusiasm seemingly genuine. "He must be thrilled." "He is. He wants us all to have dinner to celebrate." "That sounds nice. When?" I hesitated, the lie I'd told Ethan sitting uncomfortably between us. "I told him you were working tomorrow night." She pulled back slightly, studying my face. "But I'm not. Why would you say that?" The question hung in the air, demanding an answer I wasn't prepared to articulate. How could I explain a suspicion based on nothing more than instinct, a primitive territorial response that seemed beneath the sophisticated, evolved person I considered myself to be? "I don't know," I admitted finally. "I guess I wanted an evening just for father and son. We haven't had that in a long time." She seemed to accept this explanation, though her eyes held a hint of skepticism. "That makes sense. You two need time to rebuild your relationship. I'm glad he's reaching out more." I nodded, relieved she hadn't pressed further. "It's a positive development. I just hope the promotion is legitimate, not some attempt to placate him after being passed over for something else." "You always look for the catch," she said, her tone gently teasing as she nestled back against me. Maybe good things are just happening to the people around you because you deserve some happiness. I wanted to believe, or wanted to embrace the narrative that my personal and professional lives were simultaneously ascending after years of imbalance. Yet, as the days passed, my unease grew rather than diminished. Ethan and I did have dinner that week, a surprisingly pleasant evening at his favorite steakhouse where he shared ambitious plans for restructuring his department and implementing new creative strategies. He spoke with an energy and focus I hadn't seen since his college years, before disillusionment had settled over him like fine dust. "You seem different," I commented over dessert. "Not just the promotion, but something else. More directed." He smiled, a private expression that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Let's just say I've gained some clarity recently about what I want and how to get it." "That's good," I said cautiously. "Though I hope it includes some balance. Success without personal fulfillment is a hollow victory. Trust me on that." He looked at me with genuine surprise. "That's not something I ever expected to hear from you, Dad. The man who built an empire on 60-hour work weeks, having second thoughts?" I shrugged, thinking of Mia and the perspective she'd brought to my life. "Not second thoughts, just additional thoughts. The business matters. But so do other things." Ethan studied me with an intensity that was almost uncomfortable. "She's really changed you, hasn't she? Mia, I mean." I considered this, rolling the remnants of wine in my glass. "Changed isn't quite right. More like, reminded me of parts of myself I'd forgotten." "Must be nice," he said, a strange edge entering his voice. "Finding someone who sees the real you beneath all the corporate armor." "It is," I admitted. "Unexpected, but nice. I didn't think I'd find that again after your mother." At the mention of Claire, I braced myself for the usual flash of resentment, the subtle blame that typically entered his expression. Instead, he simply nodded. "Mom found her happiness. You deserve yours too." The simple statement, delivered without rancor, caught me completely off guard. "Thank you, Ethan. That means a lot." He signaled for the check, his expression unreadable. "Just don't waste it, Dad. Second chances are rare in this life." The cryptic advice lingered in my mind long after we parted ways, a strange punctuation to an evening that had felt like a tentative bridge across the chasm that had separated us for years. When I returned to my penthouse that night, I found Mia asleep on my sofa, a medical journal open on her chest, the soft glow of a table lamp highlighting the delicate curves of her face. I stood watching her for a moment, struck anew by the unlikely miracle of her presence in my life. At 52, I had assumed the script of my personal life was largely written professional success, failed marriage, strained relationship with my adult child, a series of meaningless liaisons with women who wanted access to my wealth or status. Mia had rewritten that script, bringing warmth and authenticity into a life grown cold with ambition and disappointment. As I gently removed the journal and covered her with a throw blanket, I wondered what she saw in me, what value I provided beyond material comfort and security. The question wasn't born of insecurity so much as genuine wonder at the mathematics of our connection, the unlikely equation that had brought this vibrant, compassionate woman into orbit around a man whose emotional availability had been questioned by everyone from his ex-wife to his executive team. She stirred, eyes opening slowly, a smile spreading across her face as she registered my presence. "Hey, you're back. How was dinner?" "Surprisingly good," I said, lifting her feet to sit beside her on the sofa. "Ethan seems different. More focused, less resentful. He actually wished me happiness." "That's wonderful," she murmured, stretching languidly, before repositioning herself with her head in my lap. "Did you talk about the promotion?" "A bit. He's excited, has big plans for his department." It's strange seeing him so motivated after years of just going through the motions. She looked up at me, her dark eyes reflecting the lamplight. People change, Robert. Sometimes they just need the right catalyst. I suppose, I agreed, stroking her hair absently. Though sudden transformations always make me a bit suspicious. In business, when something seems too good to be true, it usually is. Not everything is a business transaction, she said, a hint of reproach in her voice. Sometimes people just grow, especially at his age. 26 is still so young. Her words triggered a thought I'd been avoiding, the stark reality of our age difference. Mia, at 34, was closer to Ethan's age than to mine, a fact that had occasionally caused raised eyebrows among my business associates but had never bothered me until now. You two have a lot in common, I said carefully, watching her reaction. Similar ages, shared interests. It's nice that you've connected. She sat up, fully awake now, studying my face. Are you jealous, Robert Calloway? No, I said too quickly. Of course not. It's good that you get along. That's what I wanted. But? She prompted, clearly sensing the unspoken qualification. I sighed, frustrated by my inability to articulate concerns that seemed simultaneously significant and ridiculous. No, but I'm glad you and Ethan have become friends. It makes things easier. She continued watching me, her expression softening. You know, you have nothing to worry about, right? Ethan and I get along because we both care about you. That's our common ground. The sincerity in her voice disarmed my suspicions, making them seem petty and unworthy. I pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. I know, I'm being ridiculous. A little, she agreed, kissing my jaw. But it's cute that the great Robert Calloway gets insecure sometimes. Makes you human. Don't tell anyone, I murmured against her hair. I have a reputation to maintain. We went to bed soon after, making love with a tenderness that seemed to reaffirm our connection, silencing the whispers of doubt that had plagued me throughout dinner with Ethan. As Mia drifted to sleep in my arms, I felt the tension of the past week beginning to dissolve, attributing my unease to the natural stress of integrating a new relationship with complicated family dynamics. The following days brought a frenetic pace as the convention center contract approached finalization. The legal team worked overtime, identifying potential pitfalls and clarifying obligations, while the project management division began preliminary scheduling and resource allocation. As CEO, I found myself in back-to-back meetings from dawn until dusk, negotiating final terms and managing stakeholder expectations. Amid this professional maelstrom, my personal life continued its unexpected evolution. Ethan began reaching out with unprecedented frequency, sending text messages about industry news and stopping by my office unexpectedly with coffee, just to catch up. After years of emotional distance, this sudden engagement should have been purely positive. Yet something about its timing and intensity triggered my natural skepticism. More concerning was the growing independence of Mia and Ethan's relationship. They met for coffee one afternoon when she happened to be near his office for a meeting. It was just convenient, she explained later. And I thought you'd be happy we're getting along so well. They exchanged texts about photography, about music, about obscure films neither of them had managed to convince me to watch. On one level, I recognized this development as healthy me girlfriend and my son forming a genuine connection independent of me. Wasn't this what integrated families required? Yet something about their rapport left me unsettled. The way Ethan asked about her whenever we spoke, the way she mentioned him in conversation, with a familiarity that seemed to have developed far too quickly. You two seem to have really hit it off, I commented one evening as Mia and I prepared for bed, my tone carefully neutral. Is that a problem? She asked, her voice light but her eyes watchful as she applied moisturizer at my bathroom counter. No, I lied, replacing my watch in its case with deliberate precision. "It's great." She studied me for a moment through the mirror. "You're jealous." "Don't be ridiculous," I scoffed, focusing on unbuttoning my shirt rather than meeting her gaze. "He's my son." "That's not what I meant," she said, setting down her jar of cream and turning to face me. "You're worried I'll like him more than you." I forced a laugh, the sound hollow even to my own ears. "Now that is ridiculous." She approached slowly, helping me with the remaining buttons, her fingers brushing against my chest. "Is it? You've spent years feeling like you're in competition with everyone in business, with Claire, even with other fathers when Ethan was growing up. Being the best is your defense mechanism." The simple accuracy of her assessment left me momentarily speechless. How had she seen so clearly in months what therapists and my ex-wife had tried to explain for years? "I don't see my relationship with my son as a competition," I said finally, aware I was avoiding the core of her observation. "Not consciously," she agreed, pressing a kiss to my now bare chest. "But you measure everything, Robert. Success, failure, worth, it's all quantifiable in your world. And right now, you're counting text messages and coffee meetings and trying to calculate what they mean for us." "That's not," I began, then stopped, recognizing the futility of denial. "Maybe I am. Old habits." She smiled, a gentle expression that held no judgment. "I understand, but you need to know something." She took my face between her palms, forcing me to meet her gaze. "There's no competition. There never was. What I feel for you isn't something that can be redirected or divided. It's just ours." She kissed me then, and for a while, I forgot my concerns. But later, as she slept beside me, her breathing deep and even, I found myself staring at the ceiling, replaying moments from the past weeks, searching for evidence that my unease was justified or proof that it was all in my head. The weekend brought a brief respite from work obligations, a rare Saturday with no meetings or urgent emails. Mia had suggested a drive to the coast, a day of playing tourist in the small maritime villages that dotted the shoreline north of the city. "You need to remember there's a world beyond conference rooms and construction sites," she'd insisted, packing a picnic basket with an enthusiasm that brooked no argument. The day was perfect clear skies, mild temperatures, the kind of spring weather that the tourism board featured in promotional materials. We drove with the windows down, Mia controlling the music, a playlist that bounced between classic rock and contemporary indie bands I pretended to recognize to avoid feeling hopelessly outdated. We stopped in a picturesque harbor town, wandering through art galleries and boutiques, Mia's hand in mine as we played the part of ordinary tourists. Over lunch at a weathered picnic table overlooking the ocean, I felt a contentment that had eluded me for decades, the simple pleasure of good food, beautiful scenery, and company that required no performance or calculation. "This is nice," I said, watching seagulls wheel against the blue sky. "Thank you for dragging me away from work." Mia smiled, the ocean breeze playing with her dark hair. "You say that like I had to force you at gunpoint. You needed this, Robert. All work and no play makes Jack a dull CEO." I laughed, stretching my legs out under the table. I haven't been called dull in years. Ruthless, yes. Intimidating, frequently. But dull is a novel criticism. "Not criticism," she corrected, reaching for my hand. "Just observation. You've gotten so used to being Robert Calloway, business titan, that you've forgotten how to just be Robert." The insight struck uncomfortably close to home. "And who is just Robert in your expert opinion?" Her expression softened, thumb tracing patterns on my palm. "He's the man who stops to help tourists with directions, even when he's running late. The man who tips restaurant staff obscene amounts because he remembers being broke. The man who still calls his former administrative assistant on her birthday 6 years after she retired. She squeezed my hand. The man who pretends to like indie rock because his girlfriend does. I felt my face warm with the simple pleasure of being known. Caught me there, though that last band wasn't terrible. They were awful, she laughed. But I appreciate the effort. We spent the afternoon exploring tidal pools and browsing small shops, purchasing nothing but enjoying the simple act of discovery. As the day waned, we found ourselves on a relatively secluded stretch of beach, watching the sun begin its descent toward the horizon. I could get used to this, I admitted, arm around her shoulders as we sat on a weathered piece of driftwood. Days that don't revolve around conference calls and project timelines. That's the plan, she said, leaning into me. Gradually deprogram you from corporate robot to functional human being. Is that what we're doing? I asked, only half joking. I thought we were just dating. She turned to face me, eyes serious, despite her smile. We're building something, Robert. At least, I hope we are. Something that lasts beyond project deadlines and quarterly reports. The simple declaration hung between us, a commitment neither of us had explicitly verbalized until now. I realized with sudden clarity that, despite our different worlds, different ages, different life experiences, I had begun to envision a future with Mia, in it not as a temporary diversion from loneliness, but as an essential component of whatever came next. I'd like that, I said finally, the words inadequate to the emotion behind them. Building something together. Her smile was radiant, transforming her already beautiful face into something that made my chest ache with the improbability of her choosing me, with all my complications and history. The moment was interrupted by the chime of her phone. She glanced at it, then quickly returned it to her pocket, but not before I glimpsed Ethan's name on the notification. Everything okay? I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. Fine, she said, perhaps too quickly. Just Ethan sending a link to that photography exhibit we were discussing. The explanation was perfectly reasonable, yet something in her expression, a flicker of guilt, quickly masked triggered the unease I'd been trying to suppress all day. You two text a lot, I observed, maintaining a light tone despite the sudden tension in my shoulders. She shifted slightly, creating space between us. Not really, just occasionally, usually about photography or books or films things friends discuss. Friends, I repeated, the word carrying more weight than I intended. Yes, Robert, friends, she said, a hint of exasperation entering her voice. Is that so hard to believe? That your girlfriend and your son might genuinely enjoy each other's company? Isn't that what you wanted? Of course, I backpedaled, recognizing the irrational nature of my suspicion. It's great that you get along. I don't know. It's new territory for me. Her expression softened. I understand. But you need to trust. Me trust us. Ethan and I care about you. That's our connection. Nothing more, nothing less. I nodded, pushing down the inexplicable doubt that continued to nag at me. You're right. I'm being ridiculous. The remainder of our day passed pleasantly enough, though a subtle barrier had been erected between us, an awareness of territory we were both carefully avoiding. By the time we returned to the city that evening, the earlier intimacy had been mostly restored, yet something had shifted a hairline fracture in the foundation we were building. Imperceptible, but potentially significant. The following week brought the culmination of months of negotiations as we prepared for the official signing of the convention center contract. As Monday dawned, I found myself in my office before sunrise, reviewing the final documentation with obsessive attention to detail. My team had been thorough, addressing every contingency, but the magnitude of the project, $30 million, 18 months of construction, hundreds of jobs demanded personal oversight. Jack Sullivan, my CFO and oldest friend, found me still at it when he arrived at 7:30, tie already loosened and sleeves rolled up despite the early hour. "You do realize we have an entire legal department for this, right?" he asked, depositing a cup of coffee on my desk before settling into the chair opposite. "Highly paid professionals whose sole purpose is document review." I glanced up from the contract pages spread across my desk. "Humor me. This project is too important for delegation." Jack sighed, a familiar sound that carried decades of friendly exasperation. The great Robert Calloway, unable to relinquish control even at the moment of triumph. Some things never change. I smiled, despite myself. Jack had been with me since the beginning, when Calloway Enterprises operated out of a rented storage unit with second-hand furniture and a single landline. His loyalty had never wavered, even during the lean years when paychecks were irregular and success seemed more fantasy than possibility. "Some things do change," I countered, leaning back in my chair. "I delegated the Miller project last month, and the hospital expansion before that." "Minor projects," Jack dismissed with a wave. "This is different. This is your legacy contract, the one that transforms us from regional player to national contender. Of course, you're micromanaging it to death." "Not micromanaging," I objected. "Just ensuring quality control. Call it whatever helps you sleep at night," he chuckled. "Speaking of which, you look like you haven't slept in days. Everything okay? Trouble in paradise with the lovely nurse?" I hesitated, unused to discussing personal matters in the office despite our friendship. "Everything's fine. Just standard pre-contract jitters." Jack studied me with a focused attention that made him an exceptional financial officer and an occasionally infuriating friend. "Bullshit. I've seen you before major contracts. This is different. What's going on?" I sighed, setting down the document I'd been reviewing. "Nothing concrete. Just a feeling." "About the contract?" "No," I admitted reluctantly. "About Mia and Ethan." Jack's eyebrows rose slightly. The plot thickens. What kind of feeling?" I struggled to articulate concerns that seemed simultaneously significant and absurd. "They've become close, very quickly. And this bothers you because?" "It shouldn't bother me," I said, frustration evident in my tone. "It should be exactly what I want, my son and my girlfriend getting along, building a relationship independent of me." "But," Jack prompted, "but something feels off. The way they text constantly. The inside jokes that formed practically overnight. The fact that they've somehow discovered a dozen shared interests I never knew either of them had." I ran a hand through my hair, aware I sounded paranoid. "It's probably nothing. Just my natural suspicion kicking into overdrive." Jack was silent for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "You've always had good instincts, Robert. In business and in life. If something feels wrong, maybe it is. Or maybe I'm just not used to sharing attention," I countered, voicing Mia's assessment. "Maybe I've spent so long being the center of my own universe that I can't handle the redistribution of focus." "Possible," Jack acknowledged. "But consider another angle. What exactly do a 34-year-old pediatric nurse and a 26-year-old advertising executive have in common that would create such an immediate bond? Beyond you, I mean." The question crystallized my unformed suspicions, giving shape to the nebulous anxiety that had been building for weeks. "You think something's happening between them?" Jack raised his hands defensively. "I didn't say that. I'm just suggesting you trust your instincts. You built this company on your ability to read situations and people. Don't dismiss that skill in your personal life." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a notification, a reminder of the executive team meeting scheduled for 9 o'clock, to finalize contract preparations. I glanced at the time, surprised to find nearly 2 hours had passed in document review. "Duty calls," I said, gathering the contracts into a neat stack. "Thanks for the coffee and the perspective." Jack stood, straightening his tie with practiced efficiency. "Any time." That's what obscenely overcompensated CFOs are for caffeine delivery and unsolicited personal advice. I smiled, grateful for the moment of levity amid the weight of professional pressure and personal uncertainty. As Jack headed for the door, he paused, turning back with uncharacteristic seriousness. "For what it's worth, Robert, you deserve happiness. Real happiness, not just professional achievement or arm candy. If Mia is that for you, fantastic. But if something doesn't feel right, well, you've earned the right to demand absolute loyalty." After he left, I sat motionless behind my desk, his words echoing in my mind. Had I genuinely earned such loyalty? My personal history suggested otherwise a failed marriage, a strained relationship with my only child, a series of connections that had ultimately proven superficial or transactional. Yet with Mia, I'd begun to believe in the possibility of something deeper, something authentic, despite our differences and the complications of our respective lives. The thought of betrayal from Ethan, from Mia, from both was almost physically painful, like contemplating the amputation of a limb I'd only recently discovered was essential to my functioning. But Jack was right about one thing. My instincts in business had rarely led me astray. The question now was whether those same instincts applied to personal relationships, or if I was projecting professional paranoia onto the most private aspects of my life. With no resolution to this internal debate, I forced myself to refocus on the immediate demands of the day: the executive meeting, final contract review, media preparation for the signing ceremony scheduled for month's end. Personal concerns would have to wait. For now, the business that had been my singular focus for decades reclaimed its customary priority. The remainder of the week passed in a blur of professional activity. As news of the impending convention center contract became public, local media interest intensified, requiring careful management of the company's public image and messaging. I found myself giving interviews to business publications, appearing on local news segments, participating in panel discussions about the economic impact of the project. My executive assistant maintained a calendar so tightly packed that even bathroom breaks required strategic planning. Amid this professional maelstrom, my personal life continued its strange evolution. Ethan's sudden engagement extended beyond our reconciliatory dinner, manifesting in text messages about industry news, unexpected visits to my office, just to catch up, and an overall warmth that stood in stark contrast to years of emotional distance. After a lifetime of feeling like I was perpetually disappointing my son, this abrupt shift should have been purely positive. Yet something about its timing and intensity triggered my natural skepticism. The transformation had coincided precisely with Mia's entry into our lives, suggesting a correlation I couldn't ignore despite wanting desperately to embrace this newfound connection at face value. And then there was Mia herself, still warm, still attentive, but somehow changed in ways I struggled to articulate. She maintained her usual interest in my work, asking about contract details and media appearances, yet I occasionally caught a distracted look in her eyes, a momentary absence even when physically present. She laughed at my jokes, shared my bed with undiminished passion. Yet something had shifted, a subtle recalibration I felt rather than saw. I tried to dismiss these observations as paranoia born of stress and sleep deprivation. The convention center contract was consuming my professional energy. Perhaps I was simply projecting that pressure onto my personal relationships, seeking problems where none existed. Yet Jack's words continued to echo in my mind. lending structure to formless suspicions. What exactly do a 34-year-old pediatric nurse and a 26-year-old advertising executive have in common that would create such an immediate bond? On Wednesday evening, I returned to my penthouse earlier than usual, a rare reprieve granted by the cancellation of a dinner meeting with potential investors. I'd texted Mia about the change in plans, suggesting we take advantage of the unexpected free time with dinner at her favorite restaurant. When she didn't respond after 20 minutes, unusual for someone typically glued to her phone, I called instead, receiving her voicemail after several rings. Probably at work, I muttered to myself, remembering she sometimes picked up extra shifts when staffing was short at the children's hospital. Still, a strange unease prompted me to call the oncology ward, a number I'd programmed into my phone during the early weeks of our relationship. "Pediatric oncology. This is Melissa," answered a cheerful voice. "Hi, Melissa. This is Robert Calloway, Mia Chen's boyfriend. Is she available for a quick call? I understand if she's busy with patients." A brief pause followed. "Mia? She's not scheduled today. She swapped shifts with Tanya last week to get the weekend off. Did you try her cell?" The information hit me with physical force, a punch to the solar plexus that momentarily robbed me of speech. "I must have misunderstood," I managed finally. "Thanks for your help." After hanging up, I stood motionless in my kitchen, mind racing through possibilities. Perhaps she'd made plans with friends. Perhaps she was shopping or at the gym, phone tucked away in a locker. Perhaps there was a perfectly innocent explanation for why she'd told me she was working when she clearly wasn't. Yet even as I constructed these rationalizations, I found myself moving toward the bedroom, driven by an impulse I didn't fully understand. In the walk-in closet where Mia kept a section of clothes for the nights she stayed over, I began methodically checking pockets and drawers, uncertain what I was looking for but unable to stop the compulsion. In the pocket of a jacket she rarely wore, I found a receipt from a cafe I didn't recognize, dated 3 days prior a time when she'd told me she was meeting former nursing school classmates for lunch. The amount suggested 2 people, not a group, but proved nothing beyond a minor inconsistency. More disturbing was what I found tucked into the lining of her toiletry bag in the bathroom, a small handwritten note on expensive stationery. "Meet me at 3. Same place. Don't text call instead. We need to be more careful. M." The note was undated, the wording deliberately vague, yet the implication was clear enough. He could only be Ethan. More careful suggested an ongoing deception. The handwriting was unmistakably Mia's. The elegant cursive I'd seen on birthday cards and grocery lists now deployed for clandestine arrangements. I sat on the edge of the bed, note in hand, a strange calm descending over me despite the turmoil of emotions beneath the surface. Part of me wanted to confront her immediately, to demand explanations and apologies, to rage against this betrayal by the 2 people I'd allowed closest to me. Another part, the strategist, the businessman who had built an empire through careful calculation-counseled patience, information gathering, certainty before action. The latter instinct prevailed. I carefully returned the note to its hiding place, erased the evidence of my search, and poured myself a drink in the kitchen. When Mia finally called an hour later, voice slightly breathless, I maintained perfect composure. "Sorry I missed your texts," she said. "Crazy night at work. 2 new admissions and Parker's fevers spiked again." The lie flowed from her with practiced ease, complete with specific details about patients I knew existed from previous conversations. The performance was flawless, betrayed only by my newfound knowledge of her actual whereabouts. "No problem," I replied, matching her casual tone. "How's Parker doing now?" "Better," she said, the fabrication expanding effortlessly. The new antibiotics seem to be working. I should be home in about an hour if you still want to grab dinner." "Sounds good," I agreed. "I'll make a reservation at Luciano's for 8:30. After hanging up, I sat in silence, contemplating my next move. The strategic approach would be continued surveillance, perhaps hiring a private investigator, gathering incontrovertible evidence before confrontation. The emotional response would be immediate accusations upon her arrival, a clearing of the air regardless of the fallout. Neither option appealed to me. The former felt coldly calculating, reducing a relationship I'd valued to the level of a business transaction under audit. The latter promised a messy, emotional scene that might yield denials rather than truth. Instead, I chose a third path observation: patience, the gathering of information through direct but unalarming means. When Mia arrived 90 minutes later, looking fresh and smiling despite her supposed hospital shift, I greeted her with a kiss and no indication of my suspicions. Over dinner at Luciano's, I steered the conversation toward Ethan, watching her reactions with newfound awareness. "Have you heard from my son lately?" I asked casually as we waited for dessert. "He hasn't returned my calls about the family dinner this weekend." A flicker of something surprise? Concern? Crossed her face before her expression smoothed into neutrality. "Not since last week," she said, reaching for her wine. "We texted briefly about a photography exhibit, but that's all. Maybe he's busy with the new position?" The lie was delivered with perfect composure, her dark eyes meeting mine without hesitation. I nodded, as if accepting this explanation, while mentally noting another confirmation of my suspicions. "Probably," I agreed. "The creative director role comes with a lot of responsibility. I'm proud of him, though. It's a big achievement at his age." "He's more capable than you give him credit for," she said, a hint of defensiveness entering her voice. "He has your business instincts, even if he applies them differently." "You've gathered that from a few dinner conversations and texts about photography?" I asked mildly, watching her reaction. She hesitated, just long enough to be noticeable. "That, and what you've told me about him over the months. Plus, I'm a good judge of character. It's part of my job reading people quickly." I smiled, allowing the topic to drift towards safer territory for the remainder of the meal. By the time we returned to the penthouse, the conversation had moved on to the convention center contract and upcoming media obligations. Yet the evening had provided what I sought: confirmation that whatever was happening between Mia and my son involved deliberate deception, coordinated lies, a conspiracy of two against one. That night, as she slept beside me after lovemaking that felt mechanical despite her performance of passion, I stared at the ceiling, piecing together a timeline of suspicious behavior, inconsistent stories, unexplained absences. The evidence was circumstantial but compelling, suggesting a connection between Mia and Ethan that extended far beyond the platonic friendship they both claimed. The question remaining was one of motive. If they were indeed involved, romantically or sexually, what purpose did the continued deception serve? Why maintain relationships with Mia as a girlfriend, Ethan as a newly engaged son while conducting a clandestine affair? The simplest explanation was financial advantage, access to my resources and connections, yet neither had made demands or shown particular interest in my wealth beyond normal expenditures. As sunrise gradually illuminated the bedroom, I found myself no closer to understanding the why behind their betrayal, only more certain of its existence. The rational response would be immediate separation, ending my relationship with Mia, distancing myself from Ethan until the initial pain subsided. Yet something held me back. A combination of lingering doubt and morbid curiosity about how far they would take this deception. Friday brought final preparations for Monday's contract signing, leaving little mental space for personal concerns amid the professional demands. The weekend loomed with its own Challenjesa family dinner originally planned to celebrate both the convention center contract and Ethan's promotion, with Mia's attendance confirmed weeks earlier. I considered cancellation, fabricating a work emergency, or sudden illness, but ultimately decided against it. The dinner presented an opportunity for observation, for witnessing their interaction with my newfound awareness of its potential duplicity. As I reviewed media talking points with our PR team Friday afternoon, my mind continued its parallel processing of professional obligations and personal betrayal, compartmentalizing with the efficiency that had served me well throughout my career. By 6 o'clock, when I finally departed the office, I had achieved a state of emotional equilibrium, not acceptance, certainly not forgiveness, but a calculated patience that would serve my need for certainty before action. The penthouse was empty when I arrived home, Mia having texted she would meet me there later after drinks with nursing colleagues, another claim I now regarded with automatic skepticism. I poured myself a scotch and moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows, assuming the same position I'd occupied weeks earlier when contemplating my professional success and personal emptiness. The irony wasn't lost on me that I should find myself back at this starting point, once again alone despite the relationship I'd believed might redefine my future. The city lights sparkled below with the same indifference, the skyline unchanged despite the seismic shifts in my personal landscape. The $30 million convention center contract remained on track, professional validation secured. Yet the promise of personal fulfillment that had briefly brightened my existence now revealed itself as illusion, a mirage that disappeared upon closer inspection. As I sipped my drink, I found myself wondering whether this betrayal was cosmically ordained karmic punishment for prioritizing business success over familial obligation throughout Ethan's childhood, for the neglect that had contributed to Claire's departure, for the single-minded ambition that had shaped every decision since college. Perhaps this was simply the price of empire personal happiness sacrificed on the altar of professional achievement, relationships reduced to transactions, trust revealed as a luxury for those with less to lose. The thoughts carried a self-pitying quality I instantly disliked, a victim mentality at odds with the agency I'd claimed in every other aspect of my life. Whatever Mia and Ethan's deception entailed, however deep their betrayal, I retained the power of response, the ability to determine what came next, how this chapter would conclude, what lessons would be extracted from the wreckage. My phone vibrated with an incoming message, Mia's name appearing on the screen. Running late. Meet you at restaurant instead. Reservation still 8 p.m. I typed a brief affirmative response, then returned my attention to the cityscape below, the grid of lights representing thousands of lives intersecting, diverging, each with its own complex web of truths and deceptions. Somewhere in that grid, Ethan and Mia were likely together, constructing the next phase of whatever plan had brought them into alignment against me. Tomorrow would bring that plan into sharper focus, their behavior under observation providing final confirmation of what I already suspected. For now, I allowed myself one more moment of contemplation before setting down my empty glass and moving to prepare for the evening ahead. A solitary figure, 30 stories above the city, surrounded by the trappings of success, yet confronting the possibility that personal connection might remain permanently beyond my grasp, regardless of achievements measured in millions. If you're enjoying this story, please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share with others who enjoy emotional drama. Your support means everything. Yesterday marked the official signing of the convention center contract, the culmination of months of negotiations, the $30 million deal that would transform Callaway Enterprises from regional player to national contender. The morning had begun with a ceremonial breakfast for key stakeholders, followed by a meticulously choreographed signing ceremony attended by local media, city officials, and business leaders. I had performed flawlessly, delivering prepared remarks with the confidence expected of a man who had just secured his company's future for the next decade. By noon, the formalities were complete. The developers had requested we finalize all documentation early, allowing their board members to catch afternoon flights back to their respective headquarters. What should have been an all-day affair had compressed into an efficient morning, leaving me with an unexpected gift of Timean afternoon, suddenly free of obligations. As the crowd of well-wishers and associates dispersed from the conference center, Jack approached, clapping me on the shoulder with uncharacteristic exuberance. "Congratulations, you magnificent bastard," he said, his normally reserved demeanor loosened by the magnitude of our achievement. 30 million, 18 months of guaranteed work, preferred contractor status with Westridge Development. You've done it. I smiled, the professional triumph undeniable despite my personal turmoil. "We've done it. Couldn't have happened without your financial wizardry." "False modesty doesn't suit you," Jack replied, straightening his tie as we walked toward the parking area. "This was your vision from the beginning. The rest of us just filled in the details." He glanced at his watch. "Executive team celebration dinner still on for tonight?" "Absolutely. Giovanni's at 7. Private room is booked." "Perfect." He hesitated, then added with careful nonchalance, "Bringing Mia?" The question carried weight beyond its simple phrasing, a subtle probe from the one person who knew my suspicions. "No," I replied evenly. "She has hospital obligations." Jack nodded, accepting this without comment, as we reached our respective vehicles. "Well, I'm heading back to the office to update the financial projections. This contract changes all our forecasts. Want to join, or are you taking a victory lap somewhere?" I considered briefly. The logical next step would be returning to the office, leveraging the momentum of the signing into immediate action. Yet the thought of watching my executive team exchange congratulatory remarks and discuss implementation details held little appeal. After weeks of mounting personal tension, the professional triumph felt strangely hollow. "Think I'll take the afternoon," I said, decision forming as I spoke. "Been operating at maximum capacity for weeks. Could use a few hours to decompress before tonight's celebration." Jack's eyebrows rose slightly. My workaholic tendencies were legendary within the company, but he merely nodded. "Probably wise. Recharge the batteries. I'll handle any fires that pop up." We parted with another round of congratulations, and I found myself driving toward my penthouse rather than the office, an unplanned deviation that felt simultaneously freeing and unsettling. The concept of free time had become so foreign that I scarcely knew what to do with it, how to occupy hours not structured around meetings and deliverables. As I navigated the midday traffic, I decided to surprise Mia with an impromptu celebration lunch. She had been genuinely supportive throughout the contract process, listening to my concerns and offering perspective when the negotiations became particularly stressful. Despite my growing suspicions about her relationship with Ethan, I couldn't deny her positive influence on my professional focusure. Insistence on work-life balance had paradoxically improved my decision-making capacity during critical phases of the contract negotiation. I stopped at Verity Wine Merchants, selecting a bottle of Dom Perignon from their temperature-controlled cellar, extravagance justified by the magnitude of the morning's achievement. The sommelier recognized me, offering effusive congratulations on the convention center contract, news of which had apparently spread through the city's business community with remarkable speed. "A historic day for Callaway Enterprises," he remarked as he carefully packaged the champagne. "This calls for proper celebration." "Indeed," I agreed, accepting the elegantly wrapped bottle. "Hence the champagne." "Excellent choice, sir. May I suggest pairing it with beluga caviar?" We've just received a fresh shipment this morning." I hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Why not? Add it to the bill." The extravagant purchase complete, I continued toward my penthouse, anticipating Mia's surprise at my midday appearance and the lavish impromptu celebration. She had mentioned working from my place today. Her apartment complex was undergoing noisy renovations that made concentration difficult. The thought of sharing this professional milestone in the middle of an ordinary Wednesday held surprising appeal, a small rebellion against the rigid scheduling that typically governed my existence. As I pulled into my reserved parking space beneath the luxury high-rise, I called home. A flash of recognition caused me to brake. Suddenly, a sleek black Audi parked in the visitors section. A vehicle I instantly identified as Ethan's. My stomach clenched, initial confusion rapidly crystallizing into suspicion. Perhaps there was an innocent explanation. Perhaps Ethan had also heard about the contract signing and had come to offer congratulations. Perhaps he and Mia were planning a surprise celebration, explaining her supposed hospital obligations that prevented her attendance at the evening's official dinner. Yet even as I constructed these rationalizations, I knew them for the desperate self-deceptions they were. The evidence had been accumulating for weeks: secretive text messages, unexplained absences, coordinated lies. Ethan's unexpected presence at my building in the middle of a workday merely confirmed what I had already begun to accept. Whatever was happening between my son and my girlfriend extended far beyond innocent friendship. I sat motionless in my parked car, considering my options. I could leave, avoiding confrontation, giving myself time to process this latest confirmation before deciding how to proceed. I could call Mia, alerting them to my impending arrival, allowing them to construct whatever narrative they deemed appropriate. Or I could proceed as planned, entering my own home unannounced, forcing whatever was happening into the open. The decision formed with surprising clarity, the businessman's strategic patience giving way to the more primal need for truth, however uncomfortable. I collected the champagne and caviar, making my way to the private elevator that would deliver me to the penthouse floor. As the doors closed and the car began its smooth ascent, I found myself strangely calm, as if the inevitable confrontation offered relief after weeks of uncertainty and suspicion. The elevator opened directly into my foyer, allowing silent entry. I stepped into my home, immediately registering subtle indicators of Ethan's presences: leather jacket draped over a kitchen stool, a set of keys on the granite countertop beside Mia's familiar key ring. The penthouse was quiet but not silent, muffled voices from upstairs indicating the location of its occupants. I set down the champagne and caviar on the kitchen counter, moving toward the staircase with deliberate steps. The voices became clearer as I ascended, though still indistinct, emanating from the direction of the master bedroom. I moved silently along the hallway, years of negotiation having taught me the value of information gathered before revealing one's presence. The master bedroom door was ajar, golden afternoon light spilling into the hallway along with sounds that left no room for misinterpretation. I should have burst in immediately, should have made my presence known, should have confronted them in the moment of betrayal. Instead, some masochistic impulse kept me frozen in the hallway, listening to my son and my girlfriend betray me in my own bed. "We can't keep doing this," Mia was saying, her voice breathy in a way I recognized intimately. "I know," Ethan replied, "but I can't stop thinking about you. It's driving me crazy. He suspects something. I've seen him watching us." A muffled groan, then, "Let him suspect. I'm tired of sneaking around. Ethan, be serious. He just signed a $30 million contract. His company is taking off. We agreed." "I know what we agreed," my son interrupted. "But things have changed. I got the promotion. I've got the down payment for the condo. We could leave now, start over somewhere else." My blood turned to ice. This wasn't a momentary lapse, a single betrayal. This was a plan. Your promotion was just confirmed yesterday, Mia said. We need to be patient. A few more weeks and he'll transfer the ownership shares. Once the convention center project is underway and the first payments come in, he'll have enough liquidity to make you a partner. That was always the plan. The words hit me with physical force, each syllable a body blow revealing the true nature of their betrayal. Not just an affair, a calculated scheme to extract financial benefit, to position themselves advantageously before discarding me. The car accident that had brought Mia into my life, the sudden interest from my previously distant son, the encouraging words about my business successful components of an elaborate deception. I must have made a sound a gasp or a strangled breath because the voices suddenly stopped. I stepped into the doorway, no longer caring about stealth. The tableau before me seared itself into my memory. Mia straddling my son in my bed, her back to the door, her dark hair cascading over pale shoulders. Ethan's eyes meeting mine over her shoulder, widening in shock and something else-y flash of triumph quickly suppressed. Dad. He grabbed Mia's arms as she whirled around, clutching the sheet to her chest. Robert, she gasped, color draining from her face. You're supposed to be at work. I leaned against the doorframe, suddenly unsure if my legs would support me. Clearly, I managed, my voice unnaturally calm. Don't stop on my account. You two seem to have a lot to discuss. Ownership shares, partnership stakes, that down payment for the condo. Ethan at least had the decency to look ashamed, scrambling to pull on his jeans. Mia's expression was more calculating, her initial shock quickly replaced by damage control. Robert, this isn't what it looks like. Really? I laughed, a broken sound I barely recognized. Because it looks exactly like my girlfriend and my son fucking in my bed while plotting to bleed my company dry. Dad, let us explain. Explain what? I demanded, anger finally breaking through the shock. How long you've been planning this? How you used me to get your promotion? How you, I turned to Mia, manipulated me from the moment you accidentally rear-ended my car. Her silence was answer enough. Jesus Christ, I breathed. The accident. That was deliberate. I never meant for it to go this far, she said, reaching for her discarded dress. It was just supposed to be about the money, but then I met you and… Spare me. I held up a hand. I don't need to hear how you developed genuine feelings while plotting to destroy me. Ethan stepped toward me, pants on but chest still bare. Dad, I know this looks bad, but I was going to tell you. When? After I signed over 30% of my company? After the convention center payments started coming in? You were going to take everything I've built. Not everything, he protested weakly. Just enough to start over. You've got more than you need. Get out. My voice was deadly quiet. Both of you. Now. Mia stood, dignity somehow intact despite her nakedness. Robert, please, we can talk about this. Nothing to talk about. It's over. I pulled out my phone. I'm calling the police unless you're both out of my house in 3 minutes. The police? Ethan looked genuinely shocked. Dad, that's insane. We haven't done anything illegal. Fraud, I said flatly. Conspiracy. And I'm pretty sure deliberately causing a car accident is a felony. Want to test your luck with a jury? They dressed in silence, gathering their belongings with jerky, panicked movements. I stood in the doorway, phone in hand, watching the two people I trusted most scramble to escape the consequences of their betrayal. As they passed me in the hallway, Mia tried one last time, touching my arm. Robert, I'm sorry. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I jerked away from her touch. Get your hand off me, or I swear to God I'll have you arrested right now. Ethan paused at the top of the stairs, his face a complex mixture of shame, defiance, and fear. "Dad, you're no son of mine," I said, the words cutting my throat like glass. "Get out of my sight." I followed them downstairs at a distance, watching as they gathered the last of their things. At the door, Ethan turned back. "What are you going to do?" he asked, a hint of his old vulnerability showing through. I met his gaze coldly. "I'm going to call my lawyer, change my will, rescind your job recommendation, and make sure everyone in this city knows exactly what kind of man you are. Dad, please." "Then," I continued as if he hadn't spoken, "I'm going to build the most successful damn construction company this state has ever seen, without a parasite for a son dragging me down." The door closed behind them with a final click. I stood in the entryway of my empty house, the champagne still chilling on the kitchen counter, my future simultaneously in ruins and clearer than it had been in years. I pulled out my phone and called my lawyer. "Jack," I said when he answered. I need you to draft new paperwork for the convention center contract. Remove Ethan from all documents, and I need to change my will. Immediately." After hanging up, I walked to the kitchen and uncorked the champagne, not bothering with a glass. The first swallow was bitter, but the second tasted like determination. They had underestimated me, assumed my success was a fluke they could manipulate to their advantage. I would show them just how wrong they were. 6 months later, the convention center project was ahead of schedule and under budget, positioning Callaway Enterprises for expansion into neighboring states. Ethan's advertising career had mysteriously stalled after several clients received anonymous information about his ethical lapses. Mia had left the children's hospital, her professional reputation tarnished by whispers of inappropriate relationships with patients' family members, rumors impossible to trace but devastating nonetheless. I spent my 53rd birthday alone on the penthouse balcony, watching the city lights flicker below. The emptiness I had felt before meeting Mia had returned, but it carried a different quality now, not the ache of potential unfulfilled, but the solid certainty of knowing exactly who I was and what I was capable of. Some men were built for family, for connection, for the messiness of human relationships. I was built for empire, and empires, I had learned, were best ruled alone. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, subscribe, and share with others who enjoy dramatic narratives. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Reintenter Claude puede cometer errores. Por favor, verifique las respuestas.